that's causing this condition. Nightshades. Nightshades are a group of vegetables which have a glucoalkaloid component to the plant, which is called alanine.
For example,
alanine. Bell peppers, tomatoes are poisonous. Potatoes. All of these cause arthritis, cause arthritic, various conditions, various states of,
and imbalance. They allow arthritic conditions.
The reason why is because
they include arthritic.
If you can imagine that if you can watch my movements of my hands now, I'll show you something. Let's just say there's an axon here, and there's a synapse, a gap here between the axon, which is a transmitting nerve, and there's another axon there, right? And so here's the gap. Okay, now cholinergic neurotransmitters are released from this synapse, which fill the cleft, which enable the transmission to occur. And so now there's what's called choline esterase. Choline esterase is a substance which comes in and cleans out all the cholinergic neurotransmitters once the electrical transmission has occurred. Choline esterase comes in and cleans all that out. Okay, so it's very important. Now, what this glycoalkaloid substance alanine does is it's a cholinesterase inhibitor. It inhibits the cholinergic receptors in the body from being cleaned up, so that the cholinergic neurotransmitters are still left in the synapse, and so it fatigues it polarizes, polarization continues to occur, and all the little bursa, which are sacs of the neurotransmitter that's within the axon, which release their fluids, there becomes very little neurotransmitter there, cholinergic neurotransmitters there. And so this creates stiffness, which leads to a bit of a stiffness when you're getting up in the morning, for those of you who are feeling a little stiff in the morning. For those of you who've had like a little bit of what they call Charlie horses, right? Have you heard about Charlie horses or something?
Those are them.
People who are feeling these are quite often, I would say, it's, as a result of eating potatoes, tomatoes, eggplant, all forms of red and green peppers, bell peppers and things. These foods really have this substance in it. Pardon?
Solanaceae family of plants.
Right. Solanine. Solanine.
Right, and I've seen in a dictionary something called the Solanaceae.
Solanaceous.
Family.
Solanaceous family, right.
So David, what else creates cholinesterase? Because there's other things that would create the flow, but that would continue to clean out that, regardless of what that diet
The alanine really blocks the whole process from occurring, and it takes about 3 weeks. It takes a little time, depending on the person's state of toxicity. I'm working with someone up in Memphis, and she's gone into remission from having rheumatoid arthritis. Such a condition that she was bedridden, unable to move, and she's gone into remission. It'll take her 3 weeks to be running, skipping and jumping again. But anyway, of course it can happen really quite remarkably quick as well.
Consider rice and corn-based societies have no arthritis at all.
Right. Yeah.
You said the Chinese are rice-based,
Yes.
and the Americans are corn-based, and so are American Indians are.
For this kind of thing.
And they have pretty profound amounts of arthritis.
Yes, actually.
They're Twinkie-based now. Arthritis on those things.
Okay, cultures who don't have any evidence for thousands of years have not had any evidence of arthritis. There's plenty of subcultures where these people don't have any evidence at all of arthritis. And you want to know something? When they presented these foods to us, when they presented the potato, they said it was a poison. And the people of antiquity went to great lengths, in fact, in the processing of potato before they eat it. And they still are doing this down there. Okay. when they gave us tomatoes, they presented them to us as poisons, and they said that, you know, they use the tomato on the plate to jazz up the looking, how the plate looks. So that's all it was used for. It wasn't used to eat, and of course, like, everything went by the wayside, you know. And now, you know, people are just gobbling into these stuff, actually. You know.
Just gobbling into it.
Okay. Interest and curiosity. That curiosity is a factor. You could give somebody a rock to look at or something, and you can really see to what degree there's learning occurring in the person and how they're open to things by the curiosity and the way they explore their environment. Curiosity is a factor. You know, so it would be interesting to make sure that you have this ability to fit this degree of curiosity into life. I think I've been intensely curious about everything, just about, you know, how an engine works, so I'm understanding how a petrol engine works, how a diesel engine works, many things, in fact, you know. Innate action, that you're making your free behaviour the path, meaning all things that are uncontrived, to make this innate action your path, to make the path something that's coming from within you, that's intrinsics, that's involving intrinsics in life, rather than sorting for others. There may be an intrinsic component to when you're sorting for others, absolutely there is. However, somebody can be saying, eat, hurry up, you know, and eat more, and be feeding you more and more, actually, for a sense of feeling that you're being loved. The person's feeling this. You know, there's something happening there that's not quite, you know, involving equilibrium, equanimity. There's something wanting to be satisfied on the outside, in fact, to feel something on the inside. So this would be not so much involving what's innate in the person, truly what's going on within the person, something that's involving intrinsics. Good idea that the innate self is involving the intuitive self, your intuitive self, which is everything, your understanding. We talked about learning, so that when bliss is occurring, bliss always happens, the state of bliss always happens as a result of you feeling that you're learning. And whenever you're feeling this state of bliss in life, it's because there's something that you're involved in, that's where you're feeling that you're learning and achieving. Another component of whole brain functioning, which is a manifestation of whole brain functioning, is your feeling of being interconnected. No matter where you are, up on the ropes course or anywhere in life, that you have this ability to be connected to the earth, and that we are connected to each other, rather than separation, dissociation, exclusion.
When somebody, interconnection to me would be like a merging with something, and when you merge with something, that would have almost all the components. It would have interest, curiosity, learning would be occurring. I mean, when we can truly merge.
Yes, actually it's possible that a person's, first of all, before that they could merge, that they're totally already merged through everything, connected to everything. And now it would be the degree to which a person's merged. Sometimes, you know, we're merging more of ourselves, perhaps. Otherwise, if somebody had to merge, you would think that they're going around separate a little.
Living in that state.
Being at one, so that you are equal to all things around you, totally equal, not sensing something with the sadness because it has less, or sympathy or anything, totally being at one with all things. Being at one, meaning that you are meeting the energy of something. I told you the story about the friend in California who got kicked out of home, yes? And this person totally was at one, being outside, was completely at one with the rain and as a result of that had met the energy of the rain. Totally. I told you that story too, yeah.
Or with a mosquito bite?
Yes,
Yeah.
well, with a yes, right.
You're talking about what is also unknown in our society is cosmic consciousness. That sense of, I mean, you're using these words.
Yes, cosmic consciousness would be like a consciousness truly of our creative intelligence of the universe, and drawing things from innate action and understanding everything, in fact, from this place of being. Okay, so living in the senses, so you have the ability to sense. Living in the senses, what would be living in the senses as opposed to doing something else? If you were not living in your senses, what's something that you might be doing? You might be acting on the garden, right? Somebody who's gardening as a recreation, they may be kind of, putting things and counting how much space and everything is between everything, and really acting on and digging, right? And the living in the senses would be really experiencing the energy truly that I was feeling as I was digging, how the earth felt, how the plants felt.
Being disassociated when you do something, or being associated.
Give us an example.
Well, like that. Like
yes.
if you're acting on something, it's like you think that you're here, and whatever it is here. It's like when people are chopping down trees to make lumber. Oh, these are just trees. Boom, 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 boom.
Yes, so for instance, it's like the people who did that film in Hollywood where the kids got killed. This person was acting, but not living in the senses. This person was totally involving the aspect of the brain which is involving doing, and not so much using their senses at all.
So
this person wasn't connected to the external world.
Which part of that brain? Which part of that brain?
Person was living in the pre-motor cortex, and not having much access to the back of the brain, but involved kind of in planning and doing.
So it's a relative.
The person was acting without their reflexes, right? It's like just before you go to jump across something, and you've had this setup, and then halfway through the setup you realise that you're going to miss out on getting over it. But because you were consciously going to do it, halfway through coming through the setup you couldn't pull yourself out of it. Has that happened to you?
Yeah.
Has that happened to you, Ned?
I was riding a surfboard one day, a really large surf.
Yeah.
And I looked back and I thought, oh, this would be a great wave. And then I looked back and I said, this is too big of a wave. And I actually made a great effort to get beyond the wave. And as I was making effort to get beyond the wave picked me up. And just totally...
Foomp.
Dumped you on the beach.
Totally dumped me. Yeah, it's like falling 15 stories. It's like... was how it felt. It was probably only 20 feet.
In other words, it's possible that you would have ordinarily gone with the wave,
right,
and just been in front of it more or less, and not had that churned up, dumped,
right. So
analog happen.
Regardless of what my desire was, the energy and my energy went together.
Well, I tell you what, whenever somebody's like planning to kind of jump across the spot, right, without allowing their intuitive self just to jump across the spot, it's possible that the person is acting without their reflexes. It's like, in the Olympics, I could put 2 seconds onto, I could really reduce 100 meters by about 2 seconds off like an amateur's time, just by sharing with them what it is that they could focus on in their brain. They could be 2 seconds quicker. By being in the senses, they're going to be much quicker. By listening to the gun to go, they're going to chop 2 seconds off the 100 meters. If they're focusing on exploding out of the blocks, they're going to be much slower, because they're involved in their doing self, not in their senses. When you're tied into your senses, you're tied into your reflexes. So somebody walking across the ground who is consciously walking across the ground out here, in the dark or something like that, they're consciously walking across the ground, I tell you, that's when the person's possibly acting without their reflexes.
There would usually be internal dialogue involved in this.
Maybe, but the main thing is the person, like, the difference would be like kind of walking in the dark, kind of walking like,
Oh God, I'm going to step on something.
like this, consciously walking. It's more like this person is without their reflexes, then the person who's naturally will, something happens, just go to the spinal cord.
Would it be like what we do with Virginia? We do walking meditation and Annie, and walking all of a sudden, more wobbly, and because I'm doing it consciously instead of just doing it.
Quite possibly, because the intuitive self is understanding. It doesn't even need eyesight to walk across the ground out here in the dark. It really doesn't. It's amazing, actually. Your feet really got a lot of intelligence. And the ankles and everything, there's really a lot of intelligence down there.
Practice.
It's like Don Juan talking about the gate of power, which is basically running through the desert or the Sorrels or any kind of wild terrain at night, and running with your knees, bringing your knees right up, and totally trusting your feet to have eyes, basically, and just to, just be flat out running through the desert and just any terrain.
Okay, so another quality would be the language of peace, which we've talked about. Okay, framing things positively, realizing that the language that we use creates whole brain functioning. Another thing is, of course, we talk a little bit about sensing the intuitive self, to becoming much more from that faculty to inspire creative influence of the future. This is very much about the intuitive self. This really doesn't come from dry fact and reason, hardly ever. When anybody ever comes up with something, that's invented something in the world, offered us something, it always mostly has come from the intuitive self, involving the intuitive self. A hemisynchronization, that you're just imagining that, if you watch my hands here now for a second, that you're imagining that here's this movement occurring and both hands are synchronistically, simultaneously, going over like this, and then you're imagining taking this motion into the head. And then, of course, the more that there's a synchronization happening here, there's more synchronizations happening in the brain. So whole brain functioning occurs because each hemisphere comes in synchronization with the other. Because generally the left hemisphere is functioning a little bit faster rate than the right hemisphere. And when the two come in synchronization with each other, the brain acts like one neuron rather than a multitude of neurons. So this would be a state that would be excellent to be able to access as a state of mind with the people that you're working with, and of course in your own life, creating whole brain functioning, getting this hemisynchronization to occur.
Can you describe some actual pathway? Something coming up through the brainstem, going through the limbic system, and then coming up the front?
Coming up the front and round like this.
Round back to the brainstem and just cycling, just continuous cycling. So you can actually envision that.
Yes, if you were to envision that,
setting this up.
Any visualization that you set up like this that's involving a synchronization is happening like that in the brain. It's a good idea to practice this. Of course, in the Vedic tradition, that's what they're doing on a regular basis with their visualization and stuff. They're doing this quite regularly, actually, and stimulating this pattern to occur in the brain.
What are they doing to stimulate?
Visualizing and doing various things, like they may have a sword or a knife, a ceremonial knife, which is the person's actually imagining that they have the ability to cut through. They have the ability to cut through and for use of things, actually. And they might have a vajra or a bell or something in this hand and be doing something, and so they're actually going through the motions of doing something with this hand, and they may be ringing a bell and learning to do this, in fact, and actually creating this pattern in the brain. This is like creating an energy pattern that then is useful for this person in life.
So you can actually influence or set up the electrical activity in the brain that you want.
You can grow up to 30% more glial cells in the head to support some function. Quite remarkably. You'd be amazed. Glial. The glial cells today, we're understanding that the glial cells are involved in electrical propagation. Mostly they thought were just involved in the structure of the brain, but now we know that they're involved very much in the propagation, electrical propagation. They're involved in giving us precursors and setting up neurotransmitters and various things that the brain needs They're very important, very, very important.
So Einstein, he did a lot of abstract thought.
Yes.
And they said that his brain, the frontal part of his brain, had what was a lot larger network of glial cells.
Yes.
And then they took a gold stem. A man could work with his hands for 60 years or something. And that part of his brain was just as heavily networked as Einstein.
That's right.
In the abstract.
Yes. Yes, excellent, Ned.
What you were saying, you said that their understanding, the belief used to be that these glial cells were only involved in the structure, but now they understand it's more involved in the function.
That they're involved very much in the functioning of the brain.
Don't you think that that's an overall understanding that's coming in there in a lot of fields, that almost everything that's involved in the structure has a lot more function than we thought?
Yes.
Hardly anything is just structure.
Like even the bones, the cartilage, with electrical propagation, the structure, shape of things. Yes, quite a bit.
Increases the glial.
Enriching the environment. Enriching the environment increases the glial cells to support some function that's involving an enriched environment in learning.
What would be an example of that?
Certainly, Einstein exiting into the front of his brain quite a bit, involving planning and sequencing. Glial cells migrated to support this function. Not only that, but Einstein also had developed quite remarkably many more dendrite connections. In other words, the axon has many connections which are called the dendritic connections, and these are connections which grow and are involving as a result of you hearing a loud noise and then remembering that noise. Okay, the way to remember that noise and hear that noise again in your head. Right after you've crossed the threshold, dendrites, and there's actually a hardware starts to be created so that you can hear that sound. And actually, mechanical change occurs in the brain, and a permanent stimulus is left in the tissue protoplasm of the brain, which then becomes the memory, in fact, of something. It's actually a configuration. It's the sum of something moving. It's actually the sum of a component of a transform of a vibrational frequency. That when that one cell starts to vibrate in that manner, it sympathetically entrains other cells to vibrate in that manner, and a person can have the memory of something as a result of it coming just from one cell.
So would if that's true, then we have the protoplasmic memory of the one cell that we got from our mother and our father.
Yes, right. And actually it's possible for someone to completely have the ability just to fire off one axon. It's quite remarkable. Out of the billions, like we have as many connections as there are stars in our universe, just about connections. Gaps, right? There's certainly as many as we have in our galaxy. That's quite a bit. And actually, that also is a configuration. How they fire off, and the configuration that they fire off in is also a way of getting to a memory. So all of this is involved, actually.
And this is why a memory can just surface seemingly out of nowhere.
Yes.
In body work, you touch somebody somewhere and they go, "Oh, I just saw something that happened when I was 4," or whatever.
Yes, because quite possibly when they were touched there, it was an anchor, somatic anchor. Maybe there was a little scent, maybe you used some words or something, and the relationship that all brought back the memory, actually. So we're going to be learning this in hypnosis especially, that the way to get back to some memory is to start to bring in some things that are involving memory through association. So it was important that somebody remembered when something occurred, and they told me, well, the first time it occurred in the supermarket, but I can't really remember much about it. Then I would say, well, what time of day was it when you were walking into the supermarket? And the person says, oh, it was 11 o'clock in the morning. It was just before, we had lunch break at work or something. And so I've said you were walking into the supermarket. So the person's starting to have that in their brain actually. And I say, you'll remember, the way that you actually went past the turnstiles, actually into the supermarket, and you'll remember the impulse goods that are just to the left, and that there's some paper towels, and there's a range of things running down the aisle there, and you'll remember the smell, and was there some music playing in the background, and remember the feeling of the floor. Anyway, so the more that you went back through association, the more likely it was the person would get back to that memory actually, because there's a state specificity. This is called a state-dependent memory, learning and behaviour theory. It's state-dependent. All memory, learning and behaviour is dependent on some state occurring. For me to get back to a memory of something that occurred to me when I was 8 or something like that, I'd have to go back and create mostly exactly the same kind of neurochemical configuration in my body. The more that I was able to go back and create that neurochemical configuration in the body, the more likely it would be then I could start to be remembering things, in fact, that occurred, at that stage. Okay, so association always toward praise. So you associate toward praise and you take praise in. When people praise you, that you really have an excellent self-congratulative strategy in life, and that you're seeing that others have this too. A robust self-congratulating strategy. Right, let's take a 5-minute break and let's come back and talk a little bit about when you look at home, is there any colours that are missing? And the person went through everything and they said the colour yellow. I said, that's very interesting, because yellow, the corpus luteum, as soon as the ovary releases that egg, that corpus luteum is the brightest yellow colour that you can imagine. Yellow is always a colour around newness. So this person really started bringing yellow into their life then, bringing things into the home that were yellow, and that a good idea to see that you have a balance of colours and things. I think I really enjoy bright, colourful things myself.
But black.
Well, black is very earth colour, very absorbing of energy. It's very yin. It's a very yin, earthy colour. And of course, people have really, people especially with fair hair like Terry, people with fair hair like dress it in black, and it really kind of brings out their hair quite a bit, colour of the hair and that. And brings on some energy that absorbs, so a balance in a way, because if a person was very fair, very white, and then they were also dressed in white, the person would really be kind of reflecting energy a lot. And so dressing a little bit in a darker colour allows a sense of absorption to occur. Then it would be interesting to see, is there any other colours? Does Terry brighten things up a little bit with a scarf, or something that's a little bright, something small but very bright? Do you do things like that much?
Earrings.
Right.
I used to be a real earring person. My child's kind of inhibited that, but lots of them are black and very flashy earrings. She likes them too.
She was a ninja in her life.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's certainly
Isn't that amazing?
Presumptuous of me, isn't it? Go around dressing people.
Isn't that amazing? Can everybody see the aura that's occurred? Just like here, there's just like a rainbow of colour wrapped all the way around here like this now.
Wow.
Actually, the colours that we wear very much do affect our aura. Look at Annie's hair and look at her face. See the redness, the glow, her aura from the jumper she's wearing?
Boy, yeah, the sweater is really catching the red aura.
Look at Libby. Look at the greenness in her face, quite incredibly, in fact, and the green aura that Libby has. Okay, so the colours that we use really do affect our aura. Look at Alice here. Look at the colours. See this colour? This purple, royal purple, she has really quite a purple aura as a result of this colour being around her. So we really affect our state of health. It's a good idea to be having a bit of a balance with colour and having some brightness there too. Alright, let's talk a little bit about recovery, whole brain functioning recovery behaviour characteristics. In other words, some characteristics that would be there if somebody was recovering from something, from some ailment.
Towards
And they're moving toward being well. They were recovering from some ailment. The very first thing that you would want to see, like if I was walking around the hospital or if I was doing something like with this person, I would be seeing to what degree is there a focus on the process of recovering, actually. Is there any focus at all in this person's mind in the process of actually recovering? So that there's a preoccupation with progress. If you didn't see this preoccupation with progress, then I would say that's one wellness recovery characteristic that there's a need to be fitted in fact. In other words, the person's totally talking about the progress, in fact, that they've had in recovering. And they're able to use their verb tense to pace into the present what they are wanting, and the pace into the past what they love to have put in the past. I was, I had, I did this. I am feeling when I am as I feel this. I will, then putting that out into the future. Bring it into the present tense, those things that you really want to bring into the present tense with the use of verb tense. So anyway, so you'd see a preoccupation with progress, and you'd want to see that. So if you didn't see that, then I would say there's something really quite lacking. A reliance on programmed relaxation, that the person's going through a moment, 5 minutes, every so often, where they're lengthening the inspiration through their nose and feeling the warmth from their heart, and that there's a degree of reliance on programmed relaxation. Sometimes the person will be feeling how their legs are feeling and relaxing, and feeling how the hands are, relaxing the hands, and feeling the shoulders and the tummy, and going through the areas of the body, becoming conscious of those areas relaxing. You would want to see that there was a degree of assurance and enthusiasm. So I'm working with a lady from Denver, and she has really had quite a problem with acidosis, an acidic system. So it's kind of taken quite a bit of the lining of her bladder. And so the very first thing that I've shared with her that she's in need of doing, I've set something up for the next 2 weeks. She's going to be doing some things. This is how you create trance. You can create most profound change for somebody by giving them a set of instructions to follow out. Right? Which is like post-hypnotic suggestion, in fact. You can create movement for someone if you can create a series of instructions for the person to carry out over a period of time. That's something that person can do. It's more likely you really will affect the change in this person. So this was one of the very first things I said to her. I said, Daryl, if you've got a job now to do for the next 2 weeks, and that was a very important job that you had, and this was the number one thing that you really need to be doing now, I would say it's laughing. And I would say that you need to laugh and giggle and chuckle and find something very humorous and hilarious, things that ordinarily would have kind of really perturbed you, to laugh, to belly laugh at stuff, and just to laugh most of the day, and to laugh for 2 weeks. And then I shared with her why. Because she would be increasing the endogenous opiates that she has in her system, because there's kind of really a backlog. There's stuff she needed to clear out. So, I mean, a number of other things I said to her too, but I said, that's one thing. So, assurance and enthusiasm. For a recovery to be there, then assurance and enthusiasm is absolutely there. That's an ingredient. Okay? Self-reliance, reliance on what's going on inside the person. Not, well, I need to try this new drug, or I need to try this new approach, or I'm going to go and see so-and-so, that they're going to help me. To what degree is the person relying on what's going on inside? What can they do about things on the inside? Generally, when somebody's kind of been through a painful situation, they generally remove themselves from being in a social situation. So then you would want to be seeing, is this person increasing their social activity? And that would be important. And that's what I said to Daryl. I said, Daryl, have you been visiting friends much and stuff? And she said, well, ever since this occurred to me, which I knew, ever since this occurred to me, I've really, let go most of my contacts with my very best friends and that. Mostly when somebody's really kind of suffering with pain, they tend to do that. And so I said to her, well, one thing here now that you're going to be doing in the next 2 weeks is you're going to be having contact again with your friends, especially your very best friends, and doing some of this in the next 2 weeks. And of course, this increased social activity draws the person out of themselves, which is very good for them because the pain is taking them into themselves, and a way of coping is to draw them out of themselves. So, the person pets a cat, or they talk with family, or they're feeling like they're connected to something more, on the outside. This is drawing an energy drawing the person out of themselves. Good communication. You would want to be making sure now. Daryl always in the past, when she would speak about her condition, she would talk about the PAIN that she had. And now I said to her, that's very important that she now talk about this as a sense of discomfort. So she's using the language of peace to talk about something that's involving pain, but she's using a word like discomfort because comfort is there, and PAIN has got to be understood somewhere in the nervous system actually. So good communication, so I'm teaching her the language of peace, using a language of inclusion, using a verb tense to be supportive of the change that's occurring for her, focusing on what she wants rather than what she, something else. Okay, so now another thing was, I said to her, do you know of anybody who's recovered from this process, from this, condition? And she told me no. She told me that she knew of no one who'd recovered, that the doctors had told her that she had a condition that was it. Most of the doctors in allopathic medicine are wanting to topically treat something, they find a substance to act on the body so that then the body has some effect. This is the allopathic medicine. Whereas like a holistic approach truly is looking at everything, looking at how this person thinks, how this person breathes, what this person eats, what this person does, all of these things in fact, because it's a composition of all of this and not any one thing by itself. In allopathic medicine they're looking at Daryl's bladder and they're saying, well, I think we can do this, kind of looking at it, and kind of, oh, maybe it gets a little better, or maybe something else, and then they're looking over here, and then they say, put this in the mouth, and then they like measure the temperature and kind of, they're kind of acting on the person. This is allopathic medicine. A holistic approach, really, I think, is more people are moving toward that, realising that the intensity and the importance, the most intense importance of harnessing this person's will. Number one, I would say. What a shame it is that anybody would spend time in a hospital bed or something like that, and everybody's running around and measuring their blood pressure, measuring the cells, amount of blood, red, white, and cells, measuring this person's pressure, doing urine analysis, and changing the person's dressings, and doing all these observable external things. Meanwhile, the person's internal contracted sense of time, much more the cause of the illness, may be completely untreated. Most of these external observable things can be counted, you see, and so people really are focused on this. And the internal contracted sense of time is not anything that we can count. So it just totally goes unnoticed. When I would say that's probably what's really in need of kind of being sorted out here.
It's not that we can't count it, it's that they don't count it. Actually, you can notice it right away when somebody has a contracted sense of time.
It's possible for someone to learn, to count something so that then they can study it. Most doctorates happen as a result of somebody counting something, mostly. So they would have to find some way to count it, actually. But it's a shame that they would have to even think that they need to count something, actually, to, understand it.
What is an internal contracted sense of time?
Okay, so just to give you an example, right? Because there's a myriad, okay? Somebody says, well, generally someone with your condition only has X amount of time left to live. And the person... and their biological clock gets set for that amount of time. And it's quite apparent through research when they count the number of people that have been told a certain amount of time, and then how this affects the person's life. And usually what has been predicted, is generally what it is that occurs. Now, if someone is not told this information, but everybody thinks, well, this person's only got X, but the person's not told this, sometimes this person's living for years and years and years after that. And a contracted sense of time would be, oh God, this is happening to me now, and I'm feeling like it's all happening at once. And then it's much, much more painful. But if something was like spread out over a year, right, you might not be able to feel it at all. So when you expand time, this is one thing that I'm doing. When people come to me who are wanting pain relief, one thing that I'm doing is I'm expanding time. I'm laying down structures into the person's psyche, which is about actually expanding time. So then what I needed to do was to have Daryl focus on someone who had recovered from this condition. And I had to say to her, in allopathic medicine, mostly they're kind of interested in the bladder. And I said, I'm interested in your colon. And she said, oh, that's interesting. And I said, how easy has it been for you to defecate? And she says, it's been very difficult. And I said, well, then that's the very first thing that we're going to be doing. Because, it's the colon very much is involved in this process, right? Because she'd been holding on to stuff quite a bit. And, of course, there's been a sympathetic vibration had affected the kidneys. There was a backlog through the blood had occurred. And there was her bladder was like really dealing with a lot of acid build up as a result of putrefaction occurring in the colon. So she had to identify with somebody else recovering, and I had to say to her that it's possible for you to recover, and I'm interested in what degree you feel you can recover.
What do the doctors call her condition? They've said something like spondylitis or something, but the main thing is they said that she's lost the lining of her bladder, basically, and that this is a disease. They look at it like that, and that's it. Mostly she was told that really there isn't anything she can do. And then I'm very interested, what is it that she can do? What can you do? Hey, let's focus on what we can do with this. So I talked to this woman in Memphis who's had arthritis and been bedridden, and she immediately went into remission. The next morning she called me and told me that everything had started, swelling all started to go down. She was feeling really on top of things. You know what? One of the major things she heard me say was that you can get well. You can recover from this. And then I told her of others who recovered from this. So she could identify with the recovery phase. Increased physical progress due to controlled activity. In other words, how is she holding her body? What is she actually doing with her body? To what degree is there an ability to relax? And what kinds of activities is she doing? Is there some degree of recreation? I suggested to her that it would be a good idea for her. I said, when was the last time you played with your children? And she said, I haven't played with my kids for the last year.
And I said, well, I think it's a good idea to get down on the floor and roll around with the kids and play with the kids. And so she did that. She had done, increased progress, physical progress due to activity, in fact, that you're bringing in. Expectations of success need to be there. One method of putting in success would be to presuppose that success has occurred. And so then you can talk about now